Okay, everybody, good morning. Wish you all a happy Pesach. I'm sure you all had a great Pesach with your families and your friends, with everyone that you love. And now we're ready to study a little bit more Kabbalah. It's nice to see everybody back, refreshed. We're going to start now with talking a little bit more about the development of Kabbalah, Chassidus, Jewish mysticism. And we were talking last time about what is written in the holy books, that you need to be at least 40 years old to be able to study Kabbalah. Okay, that probably disqualifies all of us here. We shouldn't be studying if we're under 40 years old. But it says you have to wait till you're 40, because 40 is a certain level of maturity. Pirkei Avot says that when you get to 40, you reach a level of understanding, bina. As it says, Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Jewish people, after they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, he says, only now do we start to understand what God wants from us after 40 years. He says, now we're ready to go to Israel, enter Israel. So God has given us over 40 years, he has given us a heart to understand, Lev Ladas, Vanayim Lirais, Vaznayim Lishmaya, eyes to see, ears to hear. Only after 40 years wandering in the wilderness. So I guess the same way applies after 40 years of wandering in life, you have a certain level of maturity to be able to understand the deeper nuances of life. Now, we all know that there really is in Kabbalah 3 parts to Kabbalah. To take all of the Kabbalah, all of the mystical knowledge of the Jewish people, you could divide it into 3 categories. One part is the philosophical. The other part is the meditational. And the third part is the magical or mystical. What's the difference between these 3 parts? If you give a look at Aryeh Kaplan in one of his books, he writes a lot about these 3 parts to Kabbalah. And first part is the philosophical, the ideas of Jewish mysticism, which we speak mostly at these classes. To understand God. God is something you can't bring into a laboratory, and that's why it's hard to prove that there's a God, because unlike everything else in this world that can be tested in a laboratory, God is beyond time and space. He doesn't have any physical qualities, so it's very hard to prove the existence of God in a laboratory, even though we all know that there's a God. Instinctively, we all have an instinctive belief in a God. And but what Kabbalah Chassidus does is it tries to teach you to learn about it. Da'as Elokei Avicha. It's about learning about God. It's a hard subject, but we work on it nonetheless, and that's what Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah is. It is teaching us about God, the oneness of God. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That there's a one God. To understand how could there be a one God if we look around us, we see there's a world. It seems like there's other things outside of God. And as we learn Chassidus and Kabbalah, we understand everything was created by God. Everything comes from God. So really, there's only God. Only real existence is God. There's other existences, but everything else is a dependent existence. The only real thing in this world, the only real essence is Hashem. And the more you study Kabbalah and Chassidus, and that's why it's important to study every day a little bit of Jewish mysticism, because when you look around, you forget there's a God. It's very easy to forget there's a God in this world. And we sort of get swept up in the new idolatrous notions of this world, whether it's money or power or all the other trappings of the physical world. And that's why the philosophical side of Kabbalah and Chassidus is very important. That's the first part of Kabbalah Chassidus, what it tries to accomplish. It tries to teach us, it brings us into the laboratory of God. It brings us into a place where we study and learn about God. So even though we don't understand him completely ever, but we can understand a little bit about him. They say what was faith to us yesterday is knowledge today. And now we have more to have faith for. Right? So the horizons of faith start to grow. Like a little child, they have faith for everything. Then you get older, you understand more. So the faith is for other things. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, we do have a subconscious memory that's there. That's why we have natural faith. So we have natural faith. We do all have natural faith. We all have natural memory of God. Obviously, whether it's from Sinai or we have a memory of God from our mother's womb and beyond in heaven, we remember God because we know there's God. That's why every person, you can really, people say that that the primitive man, right, the barbaric primitive man, you can't really learn anything from them because they weren't educated. But the truth of the matter is you can learn most about the human experience from primitive man. And primitive man naturally had an instinctive belief in a God. They might have been idolatrous, but they had a belief. It was there. They weren't suppressing their feelings. They were acting very, very raw. They were acting, the primitive man was acting just, based on his instincts. He had a big stick and he hit the animals, whatever, he hunted. But he was a believer. And the oldest civilizations were all believers. They had belief. Why? Because, today they'll say that they were just superstitious, they were old-fashioned, they were backward, they were uneducated. I say the opposite. From primitive man, you could learn what is the natural humanity, what is flowing in the most natural way. And what the human condition is one that people believe in God. As much as the modern academia wants to do away with that and say, no, it's just a crutch, it's just a brace, it's just religion, it's just a trick to keep the masses in it's the opium of the masses. These are all intellectuals that are telling you this. If you really want to find out what is the natural human condition, you go look at the primitive man. And primitive human was a believer. His rock, maybe he bowed down to his rock, or he bowed down to the stars or the moon. He didn't know what was that, but he knew he needed a God. Why do you need a God? Because there is a God. That's what I believe. I believe he needed a God because the human conditions, we need a God because we know we're not in control of our destiny. We're not in control of ourselves. There's a lot of things that happen to us that are beyond us. And that is humanity's dependency on a God is the natural condition. And that's what we are because there is a God. I said that many times before. If somebody was found themselves born on an island and just on the island, and suddenly they're hungry, right? They're hungry, haven't had any food. They would be able to prove to themselves that there must be food somewhere. Why? How do you know there's food? Because I'm hungry. Just because you're hungry, maybe that's just a crutch, a hunger, right? Maybe it's just a weakness that you're hungry. No. If there is a feeling within a human being that you want something, there must be somewhere something that fills that. It's like a magnetic pull that's pulling you to something that really exists. The same is if a child, a boy or a girl are born on an island and they feel an attraction to some opposite sex, and they never met the opposite sex, right? they have this kind of feeling for love, for marriage, and they never met anybody else, they would be able to prove to themselves. So there must be somewhere something called a male or a female, right? Because they have that urge. So the urge would be the proof that there probably is something somewhere. Many of the ideas that humanity yearned for all these years, and we imagine things. Where did those imaginations come from? They came from because there are those things somewhere, either in the present or in the future. Okay, but that's already stretching the idea a little bit. But to me, very clearly, the fact that we naturally, as a human beings, we have a belief in God, that means there's a God. Now, that's the first part of Chassidut, of Kabbalah, is learning about God, and not just believing in God. So believing is like I say, that's a natural, instinctive thing. Even a child has the belief. What does Kabbalah teach us? We need now to learn about God. We need to study about God. And there's a lot in the Torah about God. There's a lot in the mystical tradition that was passed down for the Jewish people from generation to generation about the philosophy of God. That's the first part of the Kabbalah. Second part of the Kabbalah is the meditational part of Kabbalah. What is the meditational part? I took off my hat. It's a whole new revelation here. What is the meditational part of Kabbalah? That's part two. Part two of Kabbalah is the meditational. Meditational is applying the concepts that are in Kabbalah and Hasidus and utilizing it to becoming closer to God, to purifying ourselves, improving ourselves. Proving ourselves, becoming better people, using these ideas that are in the mystical traditions of Judaism to perfect ourselves and become holier people. God says, you are my holy nation, you shall be a holy people. How do we become holy? So part of it is prayer. When we pray, many of us, we do prayers daily, or at least we do that once a day, 3 times a day we're supposed to be praying. Some don't get around to it, they do it at least on Shabbos or Shem Kippur, whatever it is, right? But prayer, as we know, is the ladder to heaven, and it's the ability of the human being to develop a relationship with God. Now, to create that relationship with God, it comes with effort. It doesn't just happen. We need to climb the ladder to God. We need to get closer to God. We need to elevate ourselves. We need to bring ourselves close. That's what we use prayer for. What is prayer? Prayer, most people say it, prayer is a prayer book, but it's not a prayer book. Talmud says that prayer is rachame. It's mostly thoughtful feelings of the heart and in collaboration with the mind. Prayer is about an emotional experience that we have getting closer to God. But this emotional experience doesn't happen on its own. We need to do things to create that emotional experience, which is the ladder to heaven, which happens during prayer. The words of prayer that we have in the prayer book are just triggers. They're just words that we use to trigger our feelings, to trigger our emotions. They also are words of the sages, very, very thought out words. Prayer is a language, it's a channel, but you need to know how to turn on the channel. And the channel is turned on. Our relationship with God is developed through our emotions getting involved. There has to be, it says, with every mitzvah, it says that mitzvah b'lei kavana is keguf b'lei neshama. If you do a mitzvah, any mitzvah that it might be, If you do it without feeling, without meaning, without thoughtfulness, without being present when you do it, without any emotional connection that's happening through the mitzvah. So it's a mitzvah without a kavana. Kavana is the intent. If you do it without the proper intent, we say then it's like a body without a soul. You did the body of the mitzvah, but it's dead. It's not alive. It's not a living mitzvah. So we know that the mitzvahs, the action is the most important. So tzedakah, it's about helping the poor person. So the main thing is actually to give the money to the poor person. So that's by mitzvahs. By mitzvahs, you can make an argument that even though it's not a thoughtful mitzvah, but the main thing is that you're helping someone, right? So even in a mitzvah, we say there has to be a partnership. There's a partnership between the act and the thoughtfulness that you inject and infuse the mitzvah with thoughtfulness that you put into it when you're doing the mitzvahs. Yeah. What are you saying, Arlene? Without what?
Without cheshek.
Without cheshek. Right. Without putting any enthusiasm, without any desire, without any there's no life. It's a lifeless mitzvah. So lifeless mitzvah is, it's like a body without a soul. You put up, but by mitzvahs, one can make an argument that even if you didn't put the cheshek into it, you didn't put the feeling into it, if you still did the good deed. Still did, like even if you like tefillin, let's say, you could argue, you still put on tefillin, you did something, you didn't really think about it too much. You did it maybe mechanical a bit, but you did something. But the Talmud says, regarding prayer, if you do say the words of prayer and you're not present, you're not paying attention, it's garnished. It's nothing. Not prayer. Prayer is an emotional experience. Compared to the other mitzvahs, which are primarily action related, and you put a little bit intention in it to make it alive. But prayer, the Talmud says, is kul rachmi. It's completely rachmon. It's completely emotions. That's what prayer is. So if you walk into a shul and you open up the siddur and you start reading it like a machine, like a in the old country, there was a kid that used to daven like that. He moved his lips. So his father brought him into the house one day and he showed him a bear outside the door. A bear, there was honey, and the bear was was taking up licking out the honey. So the father said, "You're just like the bear. The bear is honey, right? You're just saying you're davening, eating the words of davening. So like a lot of people, they just but their mind, they're not engaged. They're not present. Their mind is somewhere in the stocks and the bonds and the business dealings and the thinking about 1,000 things, what they're going to eat when they go to the kiddush. The mind is somewhere else. This is not real davening. It's not only it's not really, it's not davening at all. You did nothing, no accomplishment at all. Some people they start the davening, they put on their machine, and then suddenly they how did I get here? I got to the end of Aleinu. When did this happen? How did we get to the end of davening? Or they do the Amida, they're taking 3 steps back and they're wondering, are these my 3 steps back or my 3 steps forward? They don't remember. Are they starting the Amida or ending the Amida, right? Because they were never there. They were in another world. It says the place where the person's heart is, the place where the person's desire is, that's where a person is. So you could be over here, but your thoughts are in China. So you're in China. You're not in the shul. So that's why prayer has to be thoughtful. Prayers have to be present. And that's what Kabbalah gives us. You can pray. But if you're not meditating over the prayers and you're not understanding the deep ideas of the prayer, which the prayers are all very mystical, all the prayers. If you don't know Jewish mysticism, you read prayers, you don't know what you're saying. You need to understand the mysticism of it. In the prayers, they speak about the angels and about the Saraf and the Malach and these angels are jumping and they're saying Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. What is this all about? That's why you need the meditation. By studying Kabbalah and Chassidus, you understand what your prayers are about and about the relationship that's taking place in every word of prayer. How you're growing from one spiritual world to another. And every time you pray, you're climbing a ladder. What each rung of the ladder is about. And when you get the meditational part of the prayer, that's a totally different thing. You know, it's like they say there's no prophecy today, no prophets. The era of prophets was over. It ended by Chagi, Malachi, the end of the first temple or so. The end of the first temple, beginning of the second temple. That's when the era of prophecy ended. The era of prophecy ended, but the era of meditation continues till this day. In other words, we can't reach this kind of oneness with God through prophecy anymore. We don't have that kind of holiness that the prophets had in the old. But when we pray, we still can reach a certain degree of clairvoyancy, of deep. It's called Ruach HaKodesh. The what tzaddikim had Ruach HaKodesh. They had divine Holy Spirit within them. And this they accomplished through the meditation that they reached through prayer. And that's what Kabbalah tries to accomplish, is that people should become a holy people and they should grow in their holiness and closeness to God. And that is a very, very important part. The second part, it's applying the philosophy, the philosophical ideas of the Kabbalah and of the Hasidus to engage it in actually a process of meditation and spiritual growth. And it's unfortunate that many people think that when you speak about meditation, you have to go to the Far East to learn how to meditate. I mean, they might have some methodologies, which are good methodologies, etc. Might have are some good methodologies that exist around the world and all of that. But we have a lot in our own tradition, and we are the source of all religion, of all spiritual experience comes from the Jews. And we need to find it within in our own backyard, as they say. We don't need to go to the gurus and to the Dalai Lamas. By the way, there's no perfection anywhere, in this world, as we see recently. People think that they're perfect out. We're all human. We're all human. It's a human experience. We're all human. But we need to grow. And the way to have spiritual growth, the primary way to spiritual growth is through prayer and through meditation. And through the observance of mitzvahs. But as far as the Kabbalistic input over here is that you need to pray, but not just to pray. You need to learn how to pray. How do you pray? By applying some of these very deep ideas to using it to reach a state of enlightenment, to become enlightened human beings. And that happens by taking the philosophies and the ideas within the Kabbalah and the Hasidus and applying it to a daily regiment of prayer. So if you want to grow in your spirituality, set aside some time every day to pray. Good thing to start it off in the morning. Jews have done that for many years. We have a thing called Shachris. The afternoon is always good to pray a little mincha. Evening, Maariv. before you go to sleep, the Shema. But key to all of these prayer sessions is to bring them alive so that we can reach a level of enlightenment. You know, when the Moshe Rabbeinu, he would go, when the Aaron HaKohen, when they go into the Holy of Holies, they would speak to God. But how would they speak to God? They would meditate, and through that they have an elevation of their soul. Now, most people think they just God met them on the street. You know, like God said, "Hello, Moses. Hey, Moses, where are you? Oh, God. Hello, how you doing?" But the Kabbalah, in a place like that, says no. It was a Moshe went into a trance, a spiritual trance, which came through preparation and meditation. He was a refined human being. And the closer you are to God, the more you can have this kind of communication. And even if we don't today have complete prophecy as they had back then, but we still can reach a level of being in tune with God, aligned with God, through this second part of the Kabbalah, which I call meditation. And then we have finally the third part of Kabbalah. Now, the first two parts of Kabbalah, I don't think that's what they meant, that you're not supposed to study before you're 40. Because we all need to understand God. It's a mitzvah. It's 5 mitzvahs that you have every day about God. To believe in God, not to believe in idols, to love God, to fear God. Every person has to have that. So we need to have the philosophical part. What are we loving? How can I fall in love with God if I don't know what God is? Right? You can't love someone you don't know. So you need to think about God. You can't be in awe of God if you don't know what God's about. So obviously you have to learn about God. You can't reject idolatry if you don't know what the belief in God is all about. And definitely you can't have a faith in a God if you don't know what God is. So, and prayer, obviously, worshiping God. If you want to worship God, you need to know God. And then the second part, also obviously that's no problem before 40. Second part is the meditational part. Meditation is to use it as a tool for prayer, to use it as a tool for coming closer to God, to become alive. Every person has a mitzvah to become holy, to be enlightened before you're 40 as well. So what's the part of the Kabbalah? Maybe you have to wait till you're 40. That's the part of Kabbalah, which is the magical part of the Kabbalah, as they call it. Well, many Kabbalists who learned secrets of the universe, and with that they were able to alter physical nature of the world, able to change things. Right? There was a famous rabbi, his name was Rabbi Yehuda Loy. Famous story, he made a golem. The Jews were in trouble, they were being persecuted by the anti-Semites. What else is new? And he created the golem of Prague. Golem was a person he was able to make from the earth. The rabbi was able to create this kind of. They say that the golem of Prague was the precursor for Frankenstein, the story of Frankenstein. So they say actually he took the idea from the golem of Prague. But that is someone that's able to take these mystical secrets of the Kabbalah and about the building blocks of creation and use the building blocks of creation to alter the existence by meddling with what goes on with existence and creating something from nothing. That's to a larger degree, but to a smaller degree is, to do things, mystical things, learn those things which are secrets of the spiritual, magical, occult, if you can call it that can change things within the world. And that we say, stay away till you're 40. So that's why I'm not teaching you that part of the Kabbalah, because you're all under 40, right? So that's why. That's why you're not going to get from me that part of the Kabbalah. I'm not teaching how to make a goylem. A goylem, they used to call it, in the old days, a goylem was like a dummy. They used to call it a goylem. The goylem of Prague used to be the goylem. So, somebody, there was a man made out of clay and that had no intelligence, but just, he was like this kind of, helper. So there's many stories of the goylem of Prague that he would do things, but then he wouldn't know when to stop. So he would like get everything wrong. The famous funny stories of the goylem of Prague. So there was once a fellow that came to, there's a tradition that the goylem of Prague is still alive. He still exists. And he's in the old shul in Prague, because he's from Prague. So there's a shul called the Altnai Shul in Prague. It has an olive-based clock, very famous tourist site there. So that's where Rabbi Yehuda Loi was the rabbi there, and he created the Goylem of Prague. So many people go there to curious people. They go to see. The tradition is that he's somewhere in the attic of Prague. So there's a famous shamish there, a guy that runs the shul there. Somebody came to see. He wants to find the Goylem of Prague, this mystical creature that was created from clay by the Goylem of Prague, by the Ramaral. So a person came to the guy says, okay, the Rabbi tells him, I have a place. I know exactly where it is. He comes in, the guy's all excited. Wow, you have, takes him down one hallway, another hallway, takes him up upstairs, another stairs, and takes him into a washroom over there at the end of the room, hall. And he's up there, and he said, wow, where's the Goylem of Prague? He says, come here. Takes him to the next room. There's a washroom there. He opens it up, and it's an old dusty mirror. He takes his hands and he wipes off the dust on the mirror, the Rabbi, and he says, come here. I'm going to show you the Goylem of Prague. Yeah, give a look in the mirror. He says, you're the Goylem of Prague. If you think that you're going to find the Goylem in here in this shul, you are the Goylem of Prague. You are the dummy, so to speak, of Prague. Anyways, that's a Goylem. He thinks he's going to find the Goylem, but we all have a little bit of a Goylem within ourselves. But I'm not going to teach you any of the third level of the Kabbalah, the mystical, the magical parts. But what we can do is we do generally in this class, we're going to do some of the philosophical and meditational parts of the Kabbalah. But the third part, mystical parts of the Kabbalah, the very mystical parts that you're going to change the universe with, that'll be a special class, people over 40. Maybe next time we might do. Anyways, I hope I gave you a little picture of the 40-year-old thing, 3 categories, the philosophical, meditational, and the magical. Those are the 3 parts of the Kabbalah. And what we will continue, Mr. Shem, next week is I have some very beautiful ideas to tell you about our relationship with God and how Kabbalah helps enhance our relationship to God. Okay, so hope you all have a great week.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it as always.
Just a tiny bit of addition, if I may.
Yes.
That it is said that the golem only came to be moving when the Maharal put mezuzah in his mouth. And before Shabbos, he always took it out. So the golem was silent over Shabbos. And it was, the mezuzah was put back in, and that was sort of his motor, so to speak.
Okay. You're from that part of the world, so you probably know the secrets of the Goylem. Okay.
I only know what is sad, those stories. So, but I thought it was very interesting. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
You go to the shul where the golem is supposed to have been. There's steps that you can climb up the wall on the outside of the shul to go into his attic.
Okay, so when you go up there, you'll let me know if the Goylem's there.
Never went up there.
They won't let you go up. They won't let you go up. It is
a small place.
It is said to be in the attic, but nobody's
allowed. It's like one of these places no one's ever going to find out.
And by the way, Chabad is there now in the Altenai Shul.
Who's there?
Chabad.
Chabad, yeah, they're there. I mean,
Yeah,
Yes, it's
now,
right beside the
before
cemetery.
that, from
The old
way back
cemetery.
when
Yeah,
I
that's
knew it,
that's the new part of the Alt Nu Shul.
Ha!
and it's
Okay.
wonderful.
Thank you,
Yes,
Rabbi. Shabbat
thank
shalom.
you.
Shabbat shalom.
Rabbi,
Thank you so much.
Rabbi, when you were talking, you reminded me of an old saying my parents, L'Shalom, used to say, if someone was really a dum-dum, they would call them an oilim goylim.
Oilam Goylam, yeah. Oilam Goylam means the world is a Goylam. Oilam, the world, Goylam. So Oilam Goylam. Oilam Goylam means like, don't pay attention to what they have to say, the world, because Oilam Goylam.
It just popped in, like I remembered certain words now.
Yeah, Oilam Goylam, yeah. Okay, take care.